Hey, it's Sean Price with Price and Price Realtors. On this video, I want to talk about buyer representation. I had a conversation with a buyer that had come into a transaction and was looking to go through a transaction without representation because they felt like that gave them leverage with regards to the seller. They figured they could save the seller the buyer side commission, and therefore they could get that discount off the property. And so that's a common way of thinking for people, but there's a couple things that you have to understand with that thinking. Number one, if it's a for sale by owner, if it's somebody who is selling the property themselves, then yes, coming without a buyer's agent can in fact save you some money. But once a seller enters into a listing contract with an agent, with a real estate agent, and that agent agrees to list the property, in that listing agreement, they set up a commission, and let's say it's a 6% commission. So in that listing agreement, the seller agrees to pay 6% on the transaction. It is then determined which way they're going to split it up between buyer's agent and seller's agent, but the commission total is 6%. So let's say that you come into a transaction and you don't have a buyer's agent. So what will end up happening is you write your offer and it goes to the seller. The seller's agent, because the agent is handling everything. Now that seller's agent has a fiduciary responsibility, an ethical responsibility to look out for the best interests of the seller. That's the contract they signed. They also have an obligation to negotiate on the behalf of the seller. And so they're going to do everything that they're going to do to give the seller the best advantage and be taken care of as much as possible and get them as much money as possible. You going in as a buyer don't have that representation. So you're thinking that you can leverage that and save that commission and therefore get a decrease on the price of the property. Well, the way that it works is the selling agent will provide you with a document that basically says that he is representing one side of the transaction and you are going through this process without representation. And the seller still pays that full 6% commission, but instead of it being split between buyer's agent and seller agent, the seller's agent gets the full amount. That's called seller representation. You as the buyer have no representation. Now, sometimes what may happen is you may get into a situation where the seller's agent will do what's called dual representation. And dual representation means that they represent both the seller and the buyer. In that situation, the seller and the buyer, neither one have true fiduciary protections and services being provided for them because the selling agent now represents the transaction, not the individual parties. So in either one of those situations, you as the buyer are going in with limited representation in the case of dual representation, or no representation at all in the situation of scenario one, and the 6% commission is still being paid in full by the seller to the seller's agent. So there's no discount there for you not bringing a buyer's agent with you. So there's really not a positive to it because you don't have that leverage. Now, the one thing that can happen is there's what's called a variable listing agreement. And that's where if a listing agent agrees that if they end up representing both sides of the transaction, they will lower that commission. So that variable listing agreement has to be disclosed on the listing agreement for everybody to know if that transaction happens. And it does not happen very often. It's not very common for a selling agent to sign a variable listing agreement. So unless you find an agent or you find a property where the seller and the agent on the listing side have that variable listing agreement, there's no financial advantage for you because that commission is still going to be paid in full by the seller. All right, this is kind of circular in the conversation here, so if there's any confusion or if you'd like any clarification, please feel free to reach out to me, and you can private message me or give us a call. All right, have a great day, and we'll see you on your next video.